And then somebody in 2021, completely unaware of history, rediscovered that bad idea with the same problems. Not one single problem has been solved or mitigated. It's just the same bad idea. And it was presented as, I was reading articles that really triggered me, like the innovation in Bitcoin cannot be stopped. Finally, we also have a way to do NFTs. But this is literally, you can find in 2012 discussing this idea and why it's bad for Bitcoin and why it was abandoned. If you go through the discussion, and now it was being rediscovered. So my use of the word retarded is, of course, a hint at the fact that they are stupid, but they also a very old idea that was abandoned for very, very good reasons. So that particularly, to me, this ordinal hype really also hit as the evidence that the new generation of Bitcoiners are not really learning their history, which is itself a problem, because history of Bitcoin is very important to avoid repeating the same mistake over and over.
We got one of El Zonte's newest residents here with us today, Giacomo. I mean, you kind of live here now, right?
Only for 2 months,
okay.
Unfortunately. Next week, I have to go back to the cold Switzerland.
You're going to miss the best months. January and February are the best months here.
I know, but I'm originally Italian, and if you miss out Christmas with family in Italy, that's like a federal crime. You get a very harsh punishment, so I cannot.
Well, I'm excited to talk through a bunch of things today, specifically your speech on how ordinals are retarded. But we'll do the positive things first. So
yeah, let's go with the good news first.
Yes, we'll keep it positive. I kept hearing all these things about the Plan B network and this idea to have this hub all around the world, and people kept talking about Giacomo, and I didn't. I'd seen your picture and stuff, but I didn't know who you are. Who's this Giacomo guy? How is he doing all these things everywhere in the world? But then, I started getting more specifics. I was like, all right, we've got to connect. And then I found out you're right around the corner from me. So it worked out very nicely. But explain to the audience kind of how this idea for the Plan B network came about and how that ties into your own Bitcoin story and what you guys were doing early days before most people in the space even knew about Bitcoin.
Well, let's maybe start from my story, because it kind of led to what I'm doing now. So I was a theoretical physicist, and I was working as a system integrator in Accenture for a few years, for 4 years. And in 2013, I got orange struck, and I could not work on other things anymore. I had to work on Bitcoin. Actually, it was December 2012. I started studying Bitcoin. In May of 2013, I had to quit my job. And I started...
Because of Bitcoin?
Because of Bitcoin. I could not think about my job anymore. I was obsessed, as many other people. So it was probably, financially speaking, it was too early. It was not a good idea financially, but from the point of view of the life experience, it was great. I'm very happy of my choice. So I quit my job. I spoke with my wife, and she said, "You're obsessed about Bitcoin. You should just do that as a work." So I said,
"Was
yes.
she a Bitcoiner at that point?"
No. She understood that it was perfect for me, because I was very into technology and stuff for my job, but also I was a political activist, basically roaming in two different and almost not overlapping groups. One was I was participating to protest about Julian Assange. So I was in this kind of left libertarian cypherpunk groups. Most of them were like model left libertarians, very like weed and music, no economic education at all. The other side of my activism was more like von Mises Institute that we were translating in Italian, von Mises articles, the American tax revolts and stuff like that. So mostly economical culture, but without any kind of social involvement. I was
so is there not much overlap between those two? I mean, both would consider themselves libertarians.
Yes,
right?
but before Bitcoin, I was, at least locally, the only overlap between the groups. I was participating to the first kind of meeting, and everybody was just like a junkie, like a very rebel punk. And then the other meeting was just like university kids with sometimes with bow ties, very conservative from a social point of view. And I felt like the only missing link. And then Bitcoin came, and in 1 week, in December 2012, the first group started to talk about Bitcoin as privacy money and censorship-resistant money, transparency money.
That was the more left-leaning group.
Yeah. And the second started to talk about Bitcoin like the new gold standard that can actually end central banking. And so it was, okay, it's not just only me. There is something else which is overlapping. And then it started to also overlap with my work because it was a technological system. And my work was also involved with payments, fiat payments. So my wife said, okay, you are basically fixating on Bitcoin, which is covering 3 of the major interests of your life. Quit your job and just do Bitcoin. And I did, basically the day after, something like that. So from May, I tried to create Bitcoin startups. I created a mining farm in Switzerland with GPUs, and it failed badly. It was a disaster. And then I created...
Was that because of electricity costs were too high, or also, just other things at that
especially
time?
GPU delivery from China was very early. I was with my friends there. We messed up deliveries. We lost a lot of money. The few money we made was because of the price of Bitcoin. But if we bought Bitcoin instead of GPUs, it would have been so much better. We also bought some of the first ASICs from Butterfly Labs Jalapenos. When they arrived, they were just go to, like, I don't know, keep your door open or something like that, completely bricked, was completely obsolete. So that was one. Then I was still a shitcoiner in 2013. So my second enterprise was about tracking wine with the blockchain. And was
about what?
Wine.
Wine,
like,
okay.
Yeah, tracking wine because there is a problem of counterfeit wine. So let's just use the blockchain. It doesn't make any sense, but back then I didn't know, so it seemed nice. And then I participated to the launch of a Bitcoin wallet. It was the only startup that I did in 2013 that survived, which is now green, acquired by Blockstream. And then I started to create many things. I did an equivalent of Kickstarter with Bitcoin. It was Coinstarter. And it failed, nobody cared. And so many attempts. And in 2015, I actually started to understand a pattern. So basically, I was creating Bitcoin startups that were making no money at all, actually just costing me money to keep them alive. And I was making some money consulting about Bitcoin to fiat banks mostly. So I said, let's just make an industry out of this. So I created a consulting.
So even in that, was that 2015?
Yeah, 2013.
So the Italian banks were interested in Bitcoin at that time.
Intesa Sanpaolo hired me to do Bitcoin education in 2013. They were very early. And also Azimut Group in Italy, and also Poste Italiane. So very institutional clients. They were, externally, they were all following this idea of blockchain, but internally some of the innovation managers understood that they were missing out the signal and just covered the noise. So they hired me to do Bitcoin explanation, even back then. So we created a research laboratory where the business model was we use money to gather all the best Bitcoin developers and entrepreneurs from all around the world in Milan. We pay for their travel, accommodation, food, office space. We entertain them. We keep them alive. And then I hired 12 people to help them in everything. As in exchange, these 12 people were gathering information, packaging information, and selling this information to my clients as reports or investment radars and stuff like that.
I'm just curious, was most of that interaction, was it happening in Italian, English?
It was all in English. My English was very bad in 2013, but luckily at the beginning it was mostly, so I started collecting. Luckily, there was some very important Bitcoin expert living in Italy, speaking Italian, like Lawrence Naum, my partner in Green Address, which is now Blockstream Green. He was Italian, actually, even if he had the perfect English. And other people, Riccardo Casatta and other people. So I had some Italian experts, and I could gesticulate a little bit with international experts. My English was terrible. I did have to learn it on the job. I just knew how to read in English, but not how to speak.
So you didn't study English at all? This is just
in Italian school. So it's just like Spanish school or German school. You don't really, well, German is better. French schools is not really English. You study some kind of useless mnemonic stuff. Also, our pronunciation is terrible because we have a very few vowels. English is full of strange sounds that I cannot even imagine how to reproduce. Now it seems strange because my pronunciation is perfect Oxford English, but back then you have to imagine a heavy Italian accent.
That's funny. So you brought all these people together,
Yes.
and then you were producing. That's so ironic. You were producing reports for banks.
Yeah, for Fiat.
time.
For the Fiat, I was a traitor. I was no, but it was all like all the people were happy to actually educate the Fiat world about real stuff and fighting the noise, especially. Over the first year, from 2013 to 2014, I became a Bitcoin maximalist because I understood that everything else made absolutely no sense, and that lasted for a while until in 2018 with our first daughter. We decided to close it down, but
When you said it lasts for a while, you're talking about the center that you had.
The center, yeah.
Did it have a name?
BHB Network,
Okay.
BHB Lab and BHB Network.
Okay.
The acronym was not like a fake acronym. I just liked the BHB shape. So we just decided it was like Bitcoiners hacking banks or something like that, or block, hash block. But it was BHB Network. It was called Network, and this is where I'm going with this, because my idea was to replicate this model with other partners all around the world. So I had a basic agreement with Francis Puyot of Bull Bitcoin to do the same in Montreal, with Kevin Locke, which is now directing the Azure Bitcoin Azure Center, to do the same in Dublin.
Was Francis already up and operating in Montreal at that time?
He was operating the Bitcoin Embassy in Montreal. And Kevin was operating a Bitcoin center in Dublin. And another friend was operating a center in Hong Kong and another one in South Africa. So my idea was, let's replicate this model in which we host international Bitcoin experts. They do their stuff. We provide some funding, some logistical help, some support of any kind. And then we extract information and we sell this information to the fiat world. And they're going to pay because they were paying me. The problem is that when I was going to finalize this BHB network, we had a daughter, and we realized that the Milan hub, at least, was only possible because me and my wife were there all the time, like day and night. Yeah. And without this kind of presence, was impossible to maintain it. So I closed it down, and I just started to do a freelance job of consulting. So we closed it down. Everybody of my employees, they were hired by other Bitcoin companies. Many of them moved to the Blockstream office, some others in other offices. And then I started to do freelance job. And in this freelance job, I started to do a lot of things. Like currently, I'm an advisor in Ocean. We will talk about that later. Geyser, Relay, Breeze, Satsback, XSets, B Solution. I started to collect advisor roles and gigs, and I started to invest a little bit in some Bitcoin, very small investment in Bitcoin companies. I started to consult privately to Swiss banks, mostly how to do Bitcoin purchasing. The reason I moved to Switzerland initially was because Italian banks, they were eager to learn about Bitcoin, but they could do almost nothing with Bitcoin because of the regulatory pressure, because of the Italian ecosystem. Swiss banks, they were small, agile. They could not just learn about Bitcoin, but they could buy Bitcoin for their clients. Some of my clients, banks, they were buying Bitcoin for their clients already in 2017, as early as 2017. So I started to do basically this kind of freelance job. I continue to do some support to open source standard development, because one of the success that I'm very proud of about BHB Network is that we managed to put experts together in order to converge to common standards. For example, thanks to Elizabeth Stark, we understood that the idea of Lightning Network was developed independently by several different companies. So together, I used her contacts to call to Milan, to my office, Blockstream, Lightning Labs, Amico Pay, Bitfury, Ascenc, and a couple of other companies that I don't remember, Blockchain Info also. Basically, the deal was, we close you guys down in a room. We bring pizza, and you are not allowed to leave until you have a common standard. And Rusty Russell,
So Lightning Network at that time was a theoretical thing. There
was implementation, but there was not a compatibility standard of any kind.
Okay.
It was just the same idea done by several people in different ways. They came out, Rusty Russell came out as a leader of the working group with something called the Milano Protocol, that then was remained 2 weeks later as basic of Lightning technology, Bolt. So what now we have a Bolt was born in my office in Milan. It was great to have. Same things we did for timestamping. I know that one of my guests. Riccardo Casata was working on Eternity Wall, which will have some relationship with what we will discuss later about ordinals and inscriptions. It was basically an on-chain Twitter. You could write messages on-chain and respond, and he was starting to become very embarrassed because his idea was clearly non-scalable. So he was thinking maybe there is a better way. Instead of writing stuff on the blockchain, we can just Merkleize this stuff and putting only the Merkle root, the hash, on the blockchain. And Peter Todd had a similar idea. So, and there was another Russian guy with a similar idea. So we brought them in a room and we said, come out with a standard, and open timestamps was the standard.
That wasn't even driven by financial transactions at that time. It was more.
That was entirely about document, about like proof of existence of documents or proof of unicity. Was like a notarization problem, and that standard was open timestamps. We did the same with RGB. Right before I closed down the laboratory, we did this. There were people doing tokens, and there were many ideas for tokens. And they were like colored coins, Omni, and this and that. So I brought some of the best people together, and we came out with the first idea of RGB, which has now been finally developed many, many years later. So it was very cool, and I kept the last influence I managed to have in a standard was the BDK library, because my employee, Alekos Filini, was working on a library for wallets called Magical Bitcoin Wallet. And then Steve Mayer with Spiral was working on BDK, Bitcoin Development Library, kit, Bitcoin Development Kit. And basically we managed to put them together, and the code base of Alekos was kept as the best code base, and the name was better, so BDK remained the name. So that was my job, let's say, to create common standard. And but after I closed down the laboratory in Milan, my job was a little bit disorganized and entropic. Like I still are, but I was very scattered around several projects, different stuff. It felt like
you mentioned Geyser as one of those. When did Geyser start?
I think it started like 3 years ago or something like that. I'm an advisor since I think the very early stage, and just one of the many. And I'm even forgetting some. So I felt like my job was very disorganized. So that's my pitch for Plan B Network. What I want to do is to centralize things. I joke that my main joke when I presented Plan B Network in Lugano was I want to centralize our operation so that people can actually decentralize knowledge. Basically, the idea is to take all these moving parts that are also reinventing the wheels many times. Everybody in every community are recreating Bitcoin 101 courses all the time. And when you have to translate it, you recreate it from scratch. You learn some best practices, but then the other guys in other community have to learn it yet again. And everybody wants to build a Bitcoin building, a Bitcoin hub, a Bitcoin center, but everybody has to reinvent the wheel about the brand and everything. So my idea was, we can put it all together. And some of my partners and clients, people I was working with, especially two. One was the Universe of Tether, Bitfinex. They really wanted to sponsor an educational initiative. So one of the mission of Tether was, Tether initially was just a way to get money into Bitfinex. But then it exploded into incredible business, very profitable. So they had a lot of money, and they say, we want to do stuff for Bitcoin. We are sponsoring Hole Punch and peer-to-peer technology. We are sponsoring the Plan B Forum in Lugano. We are sponsoring mining. We also want to sponsor global Bitcoin education. At the same time, Fulgur Venture, which is a venture fund investing in many important Lightning startups, they wanted to create this kind of network of incubators and accelerators of Bitcoin standards, of Bitcoin startups. So we just met all together and we said, let's create a new thing that will centralize this stuff in the sense that we will create a open source platform that everybody can copy. So it's a soft kind of centralization.
But I like too how you're including a actual physical location too as part of that.
It's both. It's basically the Plan B Network is a network of physical buildings where people will be able to go to get office space, or even a Airbnb style kind of Bitcoin Airbnb, let's say, or incubator services or accelerator services, or maybe podcast rooms or whatever. And we will just put this together with some kind of soft franchising model. So I don't want to build offices. I want to reach out to people already doing something like that. We already have agreements with, for example, Madeira Hub in Madeira, with the Bitcoin Academy in Rohan by Amity Age, Sage, with the Lugano, of course, Plan B hub, that was where everything started, with other kind of communities all around the world. So there will be a network of physical places, but also a network of educational resources.
So those physical locations, a lot of them will be independently owned and operated, but they will opt in to being part of the Plan B network.
Precisely. They will keep their brand. They will keep selling their services at their own price to their own markets, but they also sell their services through the Plan B network. And if they want to opt in, and if we accept them to opt in, because we will do some kind of quality stamp on the content and on the kind of services, so of course no shitcoins and very focused kind of selection, then they will be also able to sell through the network in order to facilitate everything. The idea is to reduce wasting. So decentralization is anti-fragile, but also inefficient. Centralization is fragile politically, but also very efficient. So I think that Bitcoin education needs some kind of good centralization, in the sense that is not even dangerous, because the fragility model here is that I go mad and Plan B becomes terrible, and then you just fork our code. So not just the content of planb.network is open source, but also the code that runs the website that eventually we will use to aggregate the courses and to manage the registration. Everything will be open source. Just copy it and do your own.
Yeah, we're having that same kind of back and forth talks about, because of all the circular Bitcoin economies that are springing around the world, and the economies of scale that come, and just the efficiencies that come of doing stuff together and being able to vet, and push resources to these different communities, but also the fact that we believe in decentralization. So how do you balance those two things at the same time?
The idea is that decentralization is defined as a state in which there is no single point of failure. And even if I call this organization centralized because I'm trying to put people together and to reduce inefficiency, there is not really a critical center of attack. There is not a critical central point of failure, because I'm the point of failure. If I fail with Plan B network, you can just, so it's like, imagine a network that centralizes, but then when you attack it, it easily re-decentralizes itself. So that's not a centralization for real, just a temporary organization that can easily fall back gracefully to a decentralization. So I think that's the key. When you provide some service in which you become unreplaceable, that's dangerous, because if you are compromised, everything is compromised. If you provide the services, which is open source content, and a network of physical places which are run independently, I can be compromised and people can just opt out. There's no like a string attached. They can just opt out and they can just create another network. There are other networks. We are not even exclusive. Like if you want to participate to the Mi Primero Bitcoin network and also to the Plan B network, just do it. There is no exclusivity. Yeah. So it's just an idea to put on top some kind of coordination, a protocol, if you wish. A protocol of coordination. It will also be, though I don't want to give the impression that this is just a non-profit effort. This will be a for-profit company. It will require a fee for the commercial services, so we make it sustainable for the future, because I don't want to rely forever on donation. And important things to mention is that I mentioned the two main sponsors, Tether and Fulgur, but it was mostly the meeting with Roxy, the creator of the Cuba Bitcoin, pardon my French, I cannot pronounce it. It was already putting together a huge mass of educational resources. So we partnered up, and is basically all the resources that you can find right now in the repository of Plan B Network. They are actually collected over the last 3 years by Roxy, that collected, and his team, of course, and they systematized the knowledge and they translated in a lot of languages, also using AI tools. So it's a very cool team. I'm very happy about that. There are some challenges because I want to integrate everything. I want to cooperate with everybody. That means that I'm bringing in a lot of different people with different minds, a lot of complexity. So I hope that we'll be also efficient and not just effective, but let's see.
That's always the challenge with Bitcoiners, because they're always very opinionated on how things should be.
Right.
Getting them to work together sometimes can
not obvious, but they have some experience with that.
Yeah. So what location, or the internet location, physical locations actually up and running right now, and what's kind of the timeline?
The timeline would be to start from Lugano. That will be up and running I hope in February or end of January. So Lugano will be the epicenter. It's the place where we met to discuss this for the first time. Roxy.
And that's a physical building that they're retrofitting right now.
Five-story building in the very center of Lugano. It was a bank, ironically, and now it's a Bitcoin hub.
I love that.
And then there is also the METH Academy in Honduras, which is a beautiful building that the leader Dushan styled in a great way. It's an incredible place to be, and everybody should visit Rohan.
No, that's on my list, and it's not that far from here. I think it's a direct flight, but we just haven't found time yet.
There are some other places, like there is a place that just opened in Belgrade. There are some places that we are finalizing the agreement with. My timeline will be to have the first physical nodes by the end of February. And by January, we will start doing a global educational program that will include Cuba Plus here in El Salvador, but also Summer of Bitcoin globally. We are cooperating with the Summer of Bitcoin people, and also the summer school in Lugano that will happen to the next summer. Everything will be integrated to minimize waste and to maximize synergies between the resources and assets.
You were mentioning to me the other day, and I don't know if it's public knowledge, if you can talk about it or not, but that there will be a location in El Salvador. Can you share?
Yes,
I don't know what's public.
I cannot enter any details because I'm not the guy buying the location, so I cannot discuss other people's business, but there are very strong probability we will have a beautiful building in El Salvador as well. And of course, we are more than open to have other kind of hubs in Bitcoin Beach itself, or in Berlin, or in other places. What we will try to avoid is to have similar hubs that are too close to one another, because otherwise they will just steal network effect. So we cannot prevent people from starting Bitcoin hubs, but when we give the stamp of approval, we will also consider some kind of geographical distribution, so we don't have strong redundancy. If two people try to open a Plan B hub in Berlin, I will highly recommend that they just converge to one.
Yeah, no, and I think even most people that are motivated to do this, usually it's not for profit motive, it's more ideological. So
that's
like
true.
we were talking about, like, hey, great, if this is happening, then that's something we don't have to necessarily do in San Salvador. So I don't think that'll be a huge issue.
The good
at least in the start, till people start, sometimes people fall out over time. But
the great thing of Bitcoin and Bitcoin is that any kind of business you can create will probably underperform Bitcoins. So nobody is really so eager to steal other people's business. I mean, everybody could just relax and stack sets, and instead you feel that you want to do something good. So it's on one side, it's very easy to cooperate because there is no this kind of red water negative sum game that you see in Fiat enterprise, in which you have to steal clients. There's like scarce resources and you have to fight over it. We are not fighting over it. There is space. There is a positive sum game where everybody can participate. Of course, on the other hand, Bitcoiners tend to be also very strong opinionated, very direct, very particular. We're all a bunch of crazy people, so it's also hard to coordinate Bitcoiners, but it's fun.
So you have two kind of non-profit entities that are helping fund, but long term it will be a for-profit enterprise.
Yes, I want it to be for profit and entirely sustainable. To bootstrap it, we have the luck to have two entities that want to help bootstrapping, so we have the budget to bootstrap it. But I don't want to rely on the budget. I want it to be sustainable. I think that even if you are not aggressively seeking a profit because you already have Bitcoin stacking, also everybody already has a job. I mean, we don't need to aggressively get profit. But if it is not a profit mechanism that works, that's a signal that this is not sustainable, that you still need an exogenous force to keep it running, which is kind of fragility. So I want it to be...
Well, then too, you become dependent on somebody, and if they go off the rails, that's when people start making compromises.
Right. Making money is a signal from the market that you're doing something right. It's not the only signal. We are not in for maximizing profit. That's not the point. If we were, we would just all work in central banks to just get easily printed dollars. We're not maximizing profit, but profit is a signal from the market that what you're doing is somehow sustainable. So it's not the end goal for Bitcoiners, but I think it's an important check to have in your checklist.
So not that you can forecast, 5-10 years out, but what is your vision? Will there be 25 hubs in 5 years? Will there be 500 hubs? What is the kind of goal for this network?
We will have tiers. The lower tier will be what they call the light node, so just a local community that you can just hang out with for free. So we will just put on the map the local community, and I hope I will see 1,000 of these communities. Basically, every kind of Bitcoin meetup, which is serious and Bitcoin only, will be on the map. Then there will be what they call prune nodes, so like Axe Space, and I think we can easily have hundreds of those. Then something like what I call an archive node, which is an actual office with office space, hot desks, and this kind of services. And probably we'll have 20, 30 of those all around the world. And hubs we will probably have at the beginning very few, like we will have Lugano, San Salvador, and a couple of other. They will be important global hotspot of this network. I don't want to have 100 hubs. And then I'm thinking about citadels, where you can also have your own small nuclear reactor and stuff like that. But that's probably, that will be one.
That's a 10, 20-year plan there?
Well, small nuclear reactors are more easy to get and faster to get than you will imagine. So not necessarily so long.
Okay. Well, I'd love there to be one here in El Zonte.
I mean, you need electricity for air conditioners.
Oh yeah, no, the electricity costs here are that's one of the downsides about El Zonte is the electricity costs.
So El Salvador is lucky because of geothermal energy, which is a great asset. It doesn't marry necessarily very happily with nuclear energy because when you have a volcano and an earthquake and the reactor, it can be managed.
Yeah.
But maybe you can go. I mean, there are other places which are less seismically active where you can put a reactor.
That makes sense. So is this what you're spending most of your time in right now then?
Yes, I decided to do, I didn't quit any of my advisory jobs or any of my consultancy jobs yet, but I pledged with the sponsors to dedicate at least half of my time for the next years to this plan. I really wanted to succeed. So I will, right now it's my main focus, that's fair to say.
Okay. No, I'm just super excited about this because it's so needed. And seeing, I can't remember what they call it, the Bitcoin hub in Nashville.
Bitcoin Park.
Bitcoin Park. Forgive me, Bitcoin Park people. It's an amazing facility, but just seeing just how great it is when you get people together in person and have that interaction. Even though people think cyberpunks, but it's you need that human connection.
Physical bandwidth is impossible to replace as of now. Yeah. You need physical connection. That's also why we created the lab in Milan initially, because it's different. The bandwidth that you have, the trust that you can build is also, of course, a vulnerability because you get, like when we organized, so I organized the third Scaling Bitcoin conference in Milan with my office. And we were so scared because it was the third time in history, in 2016, where all the relevant Bitcoin developers were under the same roof. So it was also a huge single point of failure. We seriously hired a guy to check for food poisoning because we were, now having Bitcoin conference is normal. Yeah. But in 2016, having all those developers under the same roof was not considered normal. And we were absolutely scared about security. So, and also you can, like physical proximity leads to human trust, which also can backfire. If you have a friend that goes through a bad kind of path, since he is a friend, maybe you will not call him out in the same way you would. And that's natural. Yeah. That's happened for everybody. I try to avoid that trap, but it's not easy because Bitcoiners, I think they are better than others to call each other out, even among friends. That's respectable, even if not always pleasant, but it's effective. But still, a human connection is also a vulnerability. But I think it's impossible to replace.
So, speaking of calling people out and drama, let's dive into ocean mining.
Oh yeah. So this is.
First, I'm curious as to how you got involved with that, and just explain for the audience, like what is the unique value proposition that this platform is bringing, and who's the target and.
Sure. So in order to understand, we have to understand a little bit of history and specifically the Eligius pool. So Luke Dashir, Bitcoin core developer, very famous for many things, including discovering the way to make Segwit as a soft fork, avoiding the tragedy of the network splitting in 2013, many things. Luke was a protagonist in many key moments of the Bitcoin history, and he was a very particular assets for Bitcoin. He created in his own basement as a just a hobby, a mining pool, the second mining pool after Slash, which is Slash is the inventor of mining pools. And at a certain point, this Eligius pool had 20% of the network hash rate, so it was an important one. And he had some particular things. One of the things was that instead of getting all the reward to an address of the pool and then paying out workers, Eligius was paying directly in the Coinbase most of the worker. Of course, not all of them, because if a worker is too small, you cannot make 1,000 payments inside the Coinbase. You have a limited number. So at least the biggest workers were paid directly, and also you could see the block template that you were building on. So right now, every other mining pool, well, almost every other, with a very few exceptions, but all the major mining pools, when you are mining, you are not really mining with them. You are just hashing, but you don't know what. So you go there, they give you a piece of a header to play with, you play with it, and only when you find where somebody finds the block, you will see what were you working on. But you don't know in advance. So Eligius get you in advance all the content of the block, so you could know what you're mining on, and also it was paying you directly in the Coinbase. Luke got for several reasons. Luke decided to stop working on that, and Eligius pool was closed in 2017. I knew Luke because he was one of my invited experts in Milan during the BHB network days. So I had a personal relationship with him. And then basically he decided to bring Eligius back, also finishing a job that he left unfinished. What was the job? Basically two things. One, Luke was trying to extend the non-custodial part also to small miners, which is not something trivial to do. Back then, in 2016, 15, it was impossible to do it with the technology. But now there is a way to do it that he was convinced is possible using Lightning Network. It's a little bit complicated. If you want, we can talk about a little bit about that. But to make it very simple, the small hashers that cannot get a trustless payout, they can sell via Lightning Network their share of work to somebody else that can be a bigger miner or a liquidity provider from the outside. And so everybody can be, of course, at a discount. So small miners can be paid immediately, even before the block, via Lightning, and big miners can just be paid out without any custody of the pool. Okay. That was one. It was impossible back then, but now it's possible. And so Luke said, let's do it. It was
impossible prior to Lightning.
Prior to Lightning, okay. Basically. The second point that was possible back then, but Luke didn't manage to finish it, was his invention, was the idea of get block template. So his idea was, if you really want to be a miner and not just a hasher, you have to not just know about the block, but you also have to decide the block. So you should create the block, you send it to the pool. What is in the block is your decision, not the pool decision. The pool is only there to enforce fair payments in order to basically share variance. So the reason a Bitcoin mining pool exists is that you want to share variance, because otherwise, yes, you will find your block, but after 90 years and you will be already dead. So you want to find it before. You want to pool your resources with other people. So the pool will only enforce the payment, but the content of the block, if you want to signal for a soft fork or not, if you want to mine an empty block or a full block, if you want to mine a block with high fees or low fees, if you want to, everything else will be your decision. He called this idea get block template, but he never finished it. Then this idea was revamped as a better hash, but nobody finished it. Then this idea entered what is now called Stratum V2. Stratum V2 is actually, Stratum version 2 is actually a big bundle of things, of which many are not connected with this. But one of those things potentially is the template of the block being created not by the pool, but by the hasher. So Luke said, okay, now that we have different technology, I want to bring Eligius back. We will start bringing it back as it was, just identical. We will add Lightning for the total payout share market that I described before, and we will add get block template, which is now is called Stratum v2, not necessarily using the same Stratum v2 code. He met Jack Dorsey in a conference here in Latin America, and Jack Dorsey was a fan of Luke for his previous work, and Jack approached Luke and was like, "What are you working on?" "I want to bring Eligius back." And Jack said, "Okay, let's make a serious company. Let's do something big about that." So I was already in contact with Luke for many things, and he asked me to become part of it. I was super happy to be a very, very small investor and to be part of the board. And so we finally launched. And then, of course, everything was smooth and drama-free, and everything was happy, happy ever after.
Smooth sailing afterwards. So when people are talking about the ocean censoring transactions, it goes back to part of this design of them being able to choose as they're building the block and be able to exclude certain.
Not really.
And talk to me like I'm a kindergartner, because I'm not a technical person.
So there are things for the drama that occurred in the last weeks. And there are two key elements, in my opinion. One element is that what I described to you, which is very, very cool, is not really what is happening now in Ocean, which is the new name of Eligius.
Okay.
It's now Ocean is just Eligius. What is happening is a research and development with this investment that is starting now, and it will be ready when it will be ready. So probably the excitement that we managed to transmit with this roadmap was a little bit was not counterbalanced by the clear explanation that what is live since the 2 weeks is just the old Eligius, and these two very cool things are happening after. So still, you have the non-custodial payment for the big miners, which is cool, and you have the block transparency that you can see before. The second thing that happened is that people were not used to know in advance the content of a block, but now they could see it before. So unlike other pools where you can find some surprise but you find it after, with Ocean they were able to find it before. So some people started to see something different. For example, they've seen that Ocean is using another implementation of Bitcoin Core, which is called Knots, maintained by Luke, which is not surprising because Eligius was also using Knots. So for us, it was obvious. Yeah. Until you are not delegating, until you go to phase 2, in which people will build their own blocks, the pool will still build the block as it were, but this block is built by Knots, which has different kind of filters, for example, for mempool spam than Bitcoin Core. So they noticed some differences in filtering. For example, these inscriptions were mostly filtered out, not really at the beginning, because at the beginning the pool was running Knots version 23, then 25, but as a general idea. And
were those filters specifically designed to
prevent inscriptions and other things that Luke considers spam? So the main message that we were excited about was that eventually miners will be able to build their own thing, which we may disagree about, but this is still a healthy kind of disagreement, because even if your block sucks, still, it's you building it, not the pool. So it's still a decentralization. That's the great long-term design. We didn't focus very much on explaining what was the design before that moment. And for example, this connects with all the drama about Ordinals and the definition of spam, and a lot of discussion ensued about that. A discussion that I find, it was very upsetting to me, because it revealed some basic misconceptions in the Bitcoin community that I thought was a little bit better equipped to deal with it. One misconception is that, for example, Bitcoin Core, normal Bitcoin node doesn't filter anything, and if you pay, you enter. That's not true. For example, if you create a valid transaction which has an op return with more than 80 bytes, it's a valid transaction. That means that if Bitcoin Core will find it in a block, it will consider it valid. But it is a non-standard transaction. So your Bitcoin Core and all the mining pools running Bitcoin Core will filter out this transaction, even if it pays a very high fees. Why? Because core developer felt that more than 80 bytes was probably going to damage the network more than it was worth it. And so they just decided to put a limit. It's still a valid transaction, but it's not standard.
And that was a somewhat arbitrary decision.
Arbitrary.
80.
But for example, the arbitrary decision in Bitcoin Core was 40. Then Luke forked out his implementation, Knots, Then Bitcoin Core moved the limit from 40 to 80, also a little bit arbitrary. Luke kept the limit to 40 because he said, I mean, a hash is less than 40 bytes. If you put a hash and some identifiers, we get to 40 something. So it doesn't, I don't want to go to 80.
Yeah.
So Ocean is mining blocks that include only transaction that have op return shorter than 40, while Core is mining only transaction that have op return shorter than 80. Both are filtering. Spam, for example, dust limits. All the pool, every pool, are not including transactions that are smaller than some hundreds of Satoshis, because those are considered spam by the network, because the effort for nodes to elaborate it is more than the economic value that you are moving. That doesn't mean that those are invalid. If you find it in a block, they are valid. But if you find it in your mempool will reject them. Knots has different filters than the Bitcoin Core. And what is basically the discussion was about censoring, which I think is very, very misleading, because the idea of censorship, first of all, usually it involves some kind of violence. So if you are a poet and you want to publish a poetry, and I have a newspaper, and you want me to publish the newspaper with your poetry in the first page, that's not censorship if I say no. It's my property, I decide. It's censorship if I come to your home and I arrest you for your poetry. That's censorship. Censorship is an active action to prevent somebody from speaking, while selection, curation, moderation of your own property, if you go on if you go on a forum about gardening and you start aggressively talking about fishing, people will just stop your messages, not because they are censoring you, because they're moderating their thematic forum, which is natural. That goes for everything from books to newspaper to houses to conferences. Try to submit a paper about astrology into the astrophysics conference. They will not accept it, which is not censorship. So there was this very misleading discussion, in my opinion, about the knots limits being censorship, while the core limits magically are not censorship. It's totally arbitrary.
So just to get this clear, if an inscription was done, but it was still under that 40 limit, it would still be still be included in
no, that was the 40 limits was just an exemption. Inscription actually are done in the witness, so they don't use op return in the output. So that's a different topic.
That's a different topic.
For example, that's the fight with Samurai Wallet and Whirlpool Pool, which is different. But for example, inscription, if you do that in some way, it will pass through Bitcoin Core, but it will not pass through knots, so it will not go in allegiance. But even in that case, Bitcoin Core had some limits to the script. When Taproot arrived, the Taproot soft fork allowed people to basically bypass the core limit in the witness through Taproot. Basically, you can mask some data as a script in the TapScript path spending. Knots updated the same logic of Bitcoin Core to Taproot, while Bitcoin Core decided not to update it because there was already a use case exploiting this let's say, failure of the previous spam filter. So Bitcoin Core considered it controversial to update the spam filter. Bitcoin Knots decided it was uncontroversial for him. Look, he's okay with updating the spam filter. But nothing is about censorship. It's actually the opposite, because if you think about that, the current situation is that sometimes Ant Pool, without the miners, actually the hashers, even knowing it, Ant Pool is creating empty blocks. So Ant Pool is, in this rhetoric, which is fake, censoring all the valid transaction for that block, because they're mining empty block for their own technical reasons. Luxor mined an entire block of 4 megabytes with some wizard pictures inside, with zero fee-paying transaction. It was paid off-band in fiat by a marketing department, by some guys, to do this block with 4 megabytes of picture, zero fees. So the hashers got nothing out of that. They were not paid, but the pool was paid off-band to do that. That's censorship in a way. Of course, it's actually only censorship if we consider the intention to shut up somebody, to stop some information from spreading, which is not the case in this case either. In this case, they just wanted to do a marketing operation. Ant Pool does empty blocks because they are taking technical decision. F2 Pool was cut, excluding some OFAC sanctioned transaction from the pool. But unlike Ocean, you can only understand it after you worked on the block, not before, because there was no transparency.
Yeah.
That actually closer to censorship, because the reason they're excluding that is not the technical reason. The reason is that some political body with violent enforcement could threaten F2Pool to put them physically in jail if they allow some people from Iran or North Korea or whatever to pay in every measure. So they are stopping these people to pay with PayPal, with credit cards, with MasterCard, with Visa, with bank accounts in Swift, and on Bitcoin. That's censorship. So coming to you, threatening violence if you do some kind of expression. While what F2Pool was doing was, let's say, a reaction to censorship. They were self-censoring in order to protect themselves from an external censorship. While what Ocean is doing is not censorship in any reasonable definition of the term. If we define that as censorship, then everything in Bitcoin is literally censorship. If you think about that, Bitcoin is a system that, first of all, will exclude all the blocks that don't respect the proof of work. Then they will exclude all the blocks that don't respect the issuance schedule. They will exclude it. That's an enforcement machine to enforce some set of rule. Then they will enforce the scripts. If you send a transaction with the wrong script, with the wrong signature, I will exclude it. And then they enforce some mempool policies, which also Bitcoin Core has. Everybody has the mempool policies. There is an argument, the only good faith argument that I find about this debate. There is an argument that if a transaction is paying a lot, even if you exclude it from your mempool, it will eventually get in a block anyway. So you should just take your filters out of the way and mine and just include it, because if it's not you, it's the other guy. So it's futile, and maybe it just encourages people to send off-band payments to mine. That's a legit argument against filters, and I totally buy. I mean, I think it's fair. When Ocean will move to version 2, these people that think so, they will be able to mine block with Ocean without any kind of spam filter.
Including all of the...
Including everything.
Okay. That makes sense. And the controversy with Samurai, it was not, they weren't specifically excluding those transactions because they were Coinjoin. It was just they didn't...
The transaction...
The size was...
Yeah, the transaction were not even Coinjoin. So Ocean block templates, because they're following knots without any additional patch, include every Coinjoin existing on the market right now. Join Market Coinjoin, Wasabi Coinjoin, and Whirlpool Coinjoin. They're all included. What are excluded right now from the template of Ocean are the pre-mix transaction of Whirlpool. For some reason, I don't know, ask them if you ever meet them, but for some reason, when they do so they do a premix transaction in order to get the fee from the client, from the customer, and then you don't pay more for remix. This is reasonable, so you incentivize remixing, which is good for forward privacy, so that's reasonable. They have to flag this transaction to show that you paid your fee, so they have to whitelist you. But instead of flagging this transaction on their database, which will also be better for privacy, they flag it with an op return on chain. This doesn't make any sense to me since ages. With many people say that it doesn't make any sense, but they do it. But if you want to flag a transaction, 3 bytes are okay, 4 bytes are okay, 5 bytes are more than okay for a flag. For some reason, they use 43 bytes. Now, when Whirlpool started, Eligius was already closed down since 2017. So Eligius never mined a block with more than 40 bytes for operator, because their policy was the old core policy. When Eligius came back as Ocean, they realized that not the Coinjoin transaction, but the pre-mix transaction, they were using 43 bytes of operator, and they were excluded. So the Ocean reached out, say like, we can patch this somehow. The conversation didn't go very well, surprisingly, considering the people involved. And so right now everybody's the Whirlpool Coinjoin will enter every Ocean block, but the TX zeros, until they keep 43 bytes, they will not enter there unless they give some kind of explanation of why they need to do that. In that case, Luke already said that if you understand that there is a valid use case to use 43, it will absolutely change the policy of the knots.
That makes sense.
But you see, the triggering part is that this conversation can be had in how much time did I take? Maybe 20 minutes or more. It's not a very fancy slogan. Censorship is a fancy slogan which is spreading a lot easier in the Bitcoin community. There is some inability to get some nuances currently, I say.
Do you think it's a marketing thing for them, that they see this as a way to get their name out there by creating controversy?
Yes and not, because I think they do that all the time. But in this case, they could not even predict. So when they created this choice to put 43 bytes, Eligius was dead.
No, I'm talking about more their response to it.
So I think it was the message. Ocean is censoring Coinjoin, they are enemies of privacy, was a lie, and mostly a marketing lie. But the excuses was provided by pure fate and luck, because nobody, including them, could expect some incompatibility like this. For sure, they didn't do the 43 on purpose. They reacted with a lie, which is Ocean is censoring Coinjoin, which is false, which is blatantly false. But the origin is just very bad luck, because they could not know that the legion was coming back. So it's completely random, and I still don't know why 43 bytes seems crazy.
So that's what you've been spending your last week doing.
Yeah, I was supposed to work more on Plan B network, but drama attracts me, because if somebody's wrong on the internet, I know I have to work to do, but somebody's wrong on the internet, so I have to respond to every single tweet. It's like that, and I cannot avoid it. But some people tell me when they meet me that from my tweets, they consider me more angry. While when they see me in person, also with my cell phone tweeting, I'm quite cool. I'm not really angry, but probably my writing style is a little bit more inexpressive. So I'm not so angry about this, but I'm a little bit upset when people get a term wrong on the internet.
No, I think that on Twitter, I think that's why a lot of us are attracted to it. We love clash of ideas and going back and forth, and I love to be proved wrong, but I'm gonna give it, all I got on my side first, and then if you come back and your ideas make more sense, then great. I'm more intelligent than I was when we started the conversation. But in other platforms, I know I don't really ever post on Facebook anymore, but I used to. That's a very different crowd there. When you try to use that tactic there, people get very offended. Yeah.
It's very different. Or like Nostra. I like Nostra, but nobody ever fights on Nostra. Everybody's getting along. So it's that's a low incentive for me to enter, because there's no drama. Nostra guys, you should fight more. I don't know, right? Tag me on Nostra saying that Ocean is censoring, so I can respond.
All right, you guys hear that? Drag him in. So do you think that this is just a blip, that a year from now, nobody's going to be talking about this as far as with the Ocean mining pool, or do you think it's going to cause ongoing issues for you guys?
No, I think that right now, the real issue, I think that the dramatization of censorship, some people understood that it was absurd. Some people did not. But even people not understanding it, they will not have any value in repeating that. So it may become a meme, but we don't care. The problem now is that the real challenge is that the choice to filter some transaction over others, it will benefit some real transactions. So every byte that you don't waste for spam, you can actually use it to include real transaction that will be excluded otherwise, which is good. But if the real transaction fee pressure is smaller than the spam fee pressure, that may, for many reasons, marketing, the hype of Ordinals that are retarded, but we will talk about that. If for many reasons the temporary budget of spam is higher than the temporary budget of real transaction, then the choice of Ocean to exclude spam will cost miners some money. This is also over-traumatized, because also the choice of Antpool to do anti-block will cost money. The choice of Luxor to do zero-fee spam will cost them money. The choice of F2Pool to censor, in that case, OFAC transaction will cost money. So it's not a particular, but now the degree of scrutiny, it will be higher. So I think that the drama about censorship will basically die out until we will actually have the phase 2 in a few months, where people can actually include this spam if they really want to with Ocean, because Ocean will only enforce the payout, and they will be included. They will also be able to include Whirlpool tick zeros and everything. But until that point, people, I think, may over-dramatize the fact that compared to a Bitcoin core block, a Bitcoin Knots block may earn a little bit, 1% less or 5% less. I think this can be overcompensated overall by the fact that Ocean will never create empty blocks, will never create spam blocks without fees like other pools. But there is a disadvantage is in transparency. So imagine you are a usher. You put your work in, then you find out that your mining pool created an empty block. You know that you're losing money, but what do? You move your hash rate as a vengeance. I mean, you don't. You just forget it. While if you look at the block before it happens, and you calculate, and you are able to calculate the future, and you know that you're losing some money compared to some abstract core pool, then people may actually put some pressure on Ocean, because like we are earning less money because we're not getting high fee spam. So that could be a challenge for many months until we get to phase 2.
Until you get to phase 2.
Yeah.
And phase 2, that becomes
phase 2
irrelevant.
Irrelevant. The only position I can see is, if you really want to be ideological against Ocean, even in phase 2, you can say, oh, you are in phase 2, but I know that in Ocean, some hashers are running template with Bitcoin nodes. So don't use that pool, because that pool will enable some miners to exclude the transaction. So you can extend drama wherever you want, but I don't think it will be I think that when people will be able to create their own block templates, people will be mostly happy about the new degree of freedom that you can give a single miner. And that many people will become miners only in that moment. Right now, there are no miners. The only miners right now is the mining pool. Ocean will be the first, maybe not, maybe somebody else will front run us, which is super good. Ocean is the first case in which a hasher becomes a miner. Now they run a node, they have to select the transaction, they have to choose the policy, they have to collect the fees in a way that they see more fit, and then they just have to share the fees fairly with the others. That's the only intervention of the pool.
Well, I mean, to me, and like I said, I'm not a tech person, but it seems clear that this is actually helps keep the mining potential of the miners potentially censoring people like from gaining too much power. It decentralizes it and it keeps it.
It helps. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a magic censorship remedy, because people can still censor. For example, if a government start to create start to pay miners off band to create empty blocks, miners, even if they go to to Ocean, they will create empty blocks because they are paid by government to do that.
Yeah.
Or even worse, blocks full of spam. So it's empty economically, but it's 4 megabytes for the node runners to add to your chain and to your mempool. So if somebody from outside pay hashers to do something bad, the pool that doesn't have power anymore cannot stop them anymore. So it's more decentralized, true, but it's not a magical censorship solution. The only censorship solution, unfortunately, is economical. So real black market transactions, where I use the term black market in the general sense of free market, real black market transactions have to pay more collectively in total than censorship budget. If the censorship budget is more than the black market aggregate fee pressure, then censorship on Bitcoin will happen. Ocean cannot prevent that.
Yeah.
Can make that slightly more difficult. It's still good, but it's not enough. What we need is strong fee pressure for black market.
Okay, that makes sense. So we'll close here with why are ordinals retarded? What's
I don't want to. So if you want to watch the speech in Prague, you can watch it. I'm going to spoiler a little bit the joke there. So the reason I use the word retarded was mostly to trigger people, of course, especially Americans, because I mean, people in Prague, they don't care if you use the word retarded, but Americans get crazy immediately if you use like forbidden words. But there is a joke there, because retarded also has the meaning of something coming late, basically. And the main point of my presentation is that ordinals are nothing new. There was an idea in 2012, so many years ago, before I entered Bitcoin. I discovered it later when we were working on RGB standard. There is this idea to associate to any single Satoshi a specific numbering, and to use a first in, first out meta protocol to assign the same number to two different Satoshis. So in Bitcoin, when you have a transaction, Satoshis cease to exist when the input gets spent, they get destroyed, a new Satoshi get created in outputs, but there is no deterministic connection. There is no way to assign the same identity. So this is That idea in 2012 was an idea to assign a meta protocol on top of Bitcoin. It was discussed in 2012 and it was considered bad for Bitcoin for many good reasons. One of that is that it damages privacy. It creates a new on-chain heuristics that will make Coinjoin more difficult. It's easy to track. If more people follow, is that of course you can say it's opt-in. If I use it, I will lose privacy, but others will not. But that's not true because privacy is a group game. If you lose more privacy, everybody else in your transaction, in your block will lose privacy. So it's also not scalable because Satoshis are just 2.1 quadrillion. 2.1 quadrillion can probably track all the money that we may need, all the monetary units we may need in the next century. But if you also want to track all the concert tickets, private equity, shares, stuff like that, they run out pretty fast. So it was considered a bad idea. It was basically surpassed by other idea like first something like counterparty, then RGB, always more off-chain. RGB actually increases privacy instead of decreasing it. So we arrived from this bad idea to some good idea around 2015, 2016, 2017. And then somebody in 2021, completely unaware of history, rediscovered that bad idea with the same problems. Not one single problem has been solved or mitigated. It's just the same bad idea. And it was presented as, I was reading articles that really triggered me, like the innovation in Bitcoin cannot be stopped. Finally, we also have a way to do NFTs. But this is literally, you can find like something like this. I'm assigning a single number to every Satoshi, put it on DuckDuckGo, assign a single number to every Satoshi, Bitcoin Talk, and you will get on a Bitcoin Talk page in 2012 discussing this idea and why it's bad for Bitcoin and why it was abandoned if you go through the discussion. And now it was being rediscovered. So my use of the word retarded is, of course, a hint at the fact that they are stupid, but they also a very old idea that was abandoned for very, very good reasons. So that particularly, to me, this ordinal hype really also hit as the evidence that the new generation of Bitcoiners are not really learning their history, which is itself a problem because history of Bitcoin is very important to avoid repeating the same mistake over and over.
So why do you think that, part of me, I don't understand why people would even want to do it to begin with. I've always come to Bitcoin from the monetary side of it. Like to me, it's money. I'm not a technologist. And so, you know, I've never been somebody who's into collecting things. And so I'm going to come into this with my own biases. But the arguments that they make that this kind of temporary artificial fee spike is going to be long-term good for the miners, to me, it just doesn't hold water because I feel like over time, the normal financial transactions are going to increase the fees anyways, that by the time that the mining budget issues, security budget issues would be an issue, it's going to be resolved anyways. But like I said, I'm not coming to this as somebody who understands the ins and outs of the technology, but why are they saying this is going to help save the miners, and where would you fall on that?
No, that's not just economically misguided, it's also technically misguided because that's a fake hope. So what you buy when you pay fees is finality. So you buy the fact that reorging your transaction, so double spending you or censoring you, will be harder and harder over time. So you buy, if you pay more, you enter a block faster. And if you wait more and more blocks, your transaction becomes harder and harder to reorg. So the more you pay and the more you wait, the more security you get from reorg attacks. I also don't like the sentence security budget because it's not security in general. It's security against reorg attacks, which is a very specific thing. It's the only thing
that would have to be like the 51% attack, right? That's
exactly.
The only way.
The 51% attack in order to reorg the chain. So if you pay for that, and now we have a new kind of use of the block space, a new demand that will compete with you. Instead of your transaction, now somebody has a dick pic that has to be recorded on chain and they will compete with you. You will have to pay more for the same security. Now, as a side effect, the fact that the miners are paid more means that they will invest more, so the hash rate will go up. And if the hash rate goes up, the cost to reorg goes up. So on one side, you are making reorging more expensive. But on the other side, you are making your own access to reorg resistance more expensive. So this is not a positive sum game. This may even be a negative sum game. You're losing overall some reorg resistance. So it's like saying, let me try to make an analogy that doesn't make any sense. It's not easy. This is a very hard one. So let's say that you have to pay for the police to come to protect you from, well, that's not a good example. A private security firm coming to protect you from thieves or stuff. You pay some money and they come. So now you have, but it's an auction. It's not just a fixed payment.
Yeah.
Now you have some people coming and outcompeting you. So now you have to pay more for the same amount of policing to your house. So you're losing security. Of course, you can make the case that now the security firm is making more money. So for the thief to outrun them, it will be harder because they are stronger, they're better funded. But they are better funded because somebody else is outcompeting you out of the service in the first place. So you are getting security budget, but you're losing access to that same security because you're outcompeted by external transaction. So this is like a three-card game that doesn't really bring you positive sum. It doesn't make sense.
And I think most of them, from my understanding, they're arguing longer term as the block rewards keep decreasing, that at some point, 50 years out, that the block reward won't provide enough incentive to have enough miners hashing for it to be secure.
I think that's also a flawed argument because there will always be an equilibrium price.
Yeah.
So first of all, the mining reward is going up, not down every year because the purchasing power is going up. So, but even when the subsidy will go, let's assume that the price of Bitcoin keeps doubling every 4 years, which is not even a crazy assumption. At a certain point, subsidy will go to zero, and zero times everything is still zero. So you will just have the fees. When you have the fees, you still have a non-zero amount of money there. So that amount of money may not justify the crazy hash rate of the moment, but you come back maybe in the 2140, maybe you will fall back to the hashing power of 2090 or 2080 or 2070. But Bitcoin, even in 2009, already was secure after a certain amount of blocks. So what you buy is, remember, is like progressive security. You buy the fact that after a certain number of blocks, your transaction will be harder to undo. But you just have, if the hash rate goes down, it just means that you have to wait more. So there is always an equilibrium price. It's not like the hash rate goes down to zero and you have no reorg security at all. You have a lower reorg security per number of blocks, so you have to wait for more blocks to have the same security. If your hash rate goes down by half, you will need many blocks more to get to the same security, but you just get to an equilibrium. And the idea that Bitcoin is going to be insecure, Bitcoin will likely be with the fees of 2140, with the fees only, Bitcoin is most likely more secure than Bitcoin was in 2009. Because in 2009, the total reward was very, very low because the Bitcoin price was very, very low. And Bitcoin 2009 was fairly secure after a certain number of blocks. Now it's more secure, which is great. It can become less secure. We just wait more.
So it sounds like you definitely don't think that ordinals and inscriptions are a positive for Bitcoin. What do you think is the solution? Do you think that something should be done that makes it more challenging for that to exist, or do you think that just opens up more problems?
I'm conflicted. I don't really know. I think that what can help is education. So understanding that they are retarded, understanding that it's not a good idea, it's not a new idea, that we already been there, we already solved this problem. There are better alternatives to store data. There are better alternatives than the time chain, like torrent, or freenet, or zeronet, or many other ideas, or storm, and to track assets using Bitcoin. There are better ideas, like RGB, for example. So education is the first reaction for me. Can you stop it by other means? I disagree with Luke, for example, about this. I don't think you can stop them. Even if you filter it out, somebody else will not. And if the demand is high enough in the market to have this kind of retarded stuff, they will enter some kind of block. So there is no technical way. The point by Luke, the reason that as long as Ocean will create the templates, so before the phase 2, they will keep filtering them out, is because the logic by Luke is, even if we're not going to stop them, in our block, some transactions that are not spam will actually enter. So if we didn't exist, this transaction will just stay out. We are just allowing this lower fee transaction to enter because we know that the other transactions are basically spam. So this logic is fair. That's a good, so I will argue, for Ocean, implementing inscription filters makes sense, because at least you enable real transaction to enter. For your single node, for my node, I do filter transaction because I use nodes, but it's mostly to piss other people off. I mean, I don't think it will be, I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's effective. It's just because I feel better to do something, but it's probably just a personal delusion.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think that mempool filters can stop spam attacks effectively.
What about a change to the code?
It could mitigate something, but it's an eternal fight, because there is always a way to encode spam. So fighting spam is always difficult. And sometimes people say with Bitcoin it's not difficult because we have now a cost function, the fees, the block space, so spam is solved. That's not true. You can get spam on the telephone, and telephone is expensive. People will spend our time to spam you by phone. So when you don't have a cost like email, spam becomes tragic. When you do have a cost like telephone numbers, spam is less tragic but still exists, and you cannot ever eradicate it. Bitcoin already has a cost function that keeps it fairly high. The one change to the code, which is not very extreme, in my opinion, could be undoing the witness discount that was done with SegWit. If you undo that, spam or inscription kind of spam becomes 4 times more expensive. That could be probably a good deterrent. But if somebody really wants to spam your chain, spending a lot of money, if a central bank will pay miners lots of money to fill 4 megabyte blocks with junk, if you reduce the discount, they can just fill 1 megabyte with junk, and it will cost more, but they will still do it if they had the budget to do it, if they really want to do it. So it's not a solution, it's just a mitigation. I would be in favor of reducing the block space back to 1 megabyte. I think it's politically unfeasible because there was a block size wars, that was a concession to the big blockers. Undoing a compromise is very hard politically, and fees will go up for everybody, so people will get mad, so I don't think it's possible. There are more extreme ways to prevent spam. One is interesting, which is the technology behind RGB. Is client-side validation. I'm not going to elaborate into details, but the main point is that in client-side validation, almost everything is off-chain. And so the part on-chain is very, very small. So the space to encode spam into that is very, very limited. So if we move Bitcoin to something like RGB, I don't know how to do that. Maybe it's impossible. We would have a better spam prevention. But there is no magic trick that can solve spam. As I said before, the solution is that we have to spend more, not individually, but we have, with stuff like second layers, we have to aggregate more market. Like right now, a Lightning channel is between 2 people, which is bad. It's bad for many reasons. First reason is that between 2 people, if the fees are very, very high, let's say $1,000, opening a channel is still $500. It's still a lot. Yeah. And if the other person misbehave, you can close the channel and get your money back. But then you have to pay a fee to close. So it's 1,000 entirely because the other guy is gone away. If you go to a channel which includes 100 people, then the 1,000 fee cost, it just becomes 10 for you. And when one of the guy is cheating and the other 99 are not, the fee to close the channel becomes 90, it becomes a little bit more, like with 10, like 11, something like that. Yeah. So multi-party channels are great because, for example, if the government some government is printing money to buy empty blocks, so they are paying miners to create empty blocks, or even to reorg non-empty blocks, so creating an empty chain, the only way to fight it is by bribing miners with more money. A single individual may not have enough money. The black market cannot produce maybe a single transaction that can bribe the miners. But if we can create this channel that aggregate lots of fee pressure, then we can buy it. This can be done even with the current consensus rules, but it's hard. Because in order to do a multi-party channel, you have to do a hierarchical channel with strange punishment mechanism. It's possible, but it's weird and very interactive, very expensive, very complex, with very bad UX. Something like covenants can help because it can make the same kind of structure easier to enforce with a simpler model. So I think that covenants in Bitcoin can help not just scalability, but also censorship resistance, because it will allow many more people to pull fee pressure into the same transaction, so that the miners will want to censor this transaction. They will be paid to do it, but this transaction will pay so much that other miners will be bribed, and they will basically break the front, and they will basically betray the censorship pressure. So I think covenants will be good for Bitcoin, but that's an entirely different drama. And
So do you think the inscriptions issue is going to be a thing that kind of lingers as a nuisance, or do you think a year from now we won't even be talking about it?
Maybe not 1 year, because now there is a bull market. So every bull market there are new scams, and the part of the scams of the previous bull market can linger around a little bit. Like in the bubble of 2021, we still had some ICO, even if ICOs were a thing in 2017. In 2021, you had some ICOs. Now in 2024, probably ICOs are dead. NFTs was a buzz in 2021. So maybe in 2025, 24, 25, we can see some NFT, including these retarded cruising on NFTs, which are ordinals. So maybe one cycle, but then eventually there is people will understand that you can right click on a JPEG and everything will go better.
Well, I think that's a good positive note to end on, but definitely going to have you back on when you get some of the Plan B different centers up and operating, specifically the one that's hopefully coming here in El Salvador.
Yeah. I would be glad to discuss of a finally functional San Salvador Plan B node.
And we didn't even cover all the stuff that you're doing with Cuba Plus and all the educational things.
Right. Well, let's just say that we will try to really create an army of Bitcoin developers from the universities of El Salvador. We are working together with the Ministry of Education, which is, for me as an anarchist, is a little bit surprising, but it's working so far.
I have found that funny. I'm very anti-government, but I found myself in a lot of meetings with government ministers, but they're actually trying to do good stuff.
Yes, so maybe an exception sometimes, weird scenarios. Even in movies and comic books, sometimes you have the nemesis partnering up with the hero against the biggest enemy.
Are you seeing the talent in El Salvador start to grow and broaden out? I know it was a pretty shallow pool, when they made the Bitcoin legal tender. Has that started to grow?
Yes, slowly.
Yeah.
Still a lot of work has to be done. Right now, we have to scale this up to something bigger. It's still very, very early.
Yeah. No, but I think that's a huge opportunity, because I think there's going to continue to be an influx of companies that want to be based in El Salvador because of everything El Salvador stands for now. And so
the good thing that I can tell you is that I've been allowed with Cuba Plus not just to train developers from a technical point of view, of course not myself, but all my friends, developers, teachers, but also from, let's say, an ideological point of view. So I had total freedom to teach them real cypherpunk ideals, including privacy, protection from the government, tax avoidance. No, I'm joking. Well, not explicitly, but including everything which is within the cypherpunk ethos, which was very surprising to me, because we managed to teach these topics without any kind of self-censorship, even within institutional cooperation, if you wish.
Well, that's a very positive note to end on. So appreciate you spending the afternoon, and we'll definitely follow up.
My pleasure. Speak soon.